Hi there, my name is Philip Ideson. I want to welcome you to the Art of Procurement podcast, the podcast that helps you, a forward-thinking procurement professional, position yourself and your team to proactively take advantage of the revolution that's taking place in procurement today. By interviewing industry trailblazers and sharing insights from our own experiences, my team and I pull back the curtain and shine a light on the strategies, tactics, and tools that procurement teams are using to elevate their impact. And today on the podcast, we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of ProcureCon, a series of procurement-focused events that cover both indirect procurement as a whole and a number of specific categories individually. At Art of Procurement, we've been close partners with and the official podcast partner for ProcureCon for a number of years, and we attend and facilitate conversations at a variety of events each year. So I'm joined on the podcast today by Frank Musero, who's Divisional Director, Content and Strategy of ProcureCon B2B and Finance events, Michael Dunlap, Mike is Portfolio Director, and John Ward, also Portfolio Director at ProcureCon. Now, all of the three ProcureCon work for Worldwide Business Research, which is what ProcureCon is a division of. Now, we talk about how ProcureCon has evolved, some of the behind-the-scenes secrets and what it takes to build a procurement conference, along with tips and advice to procurement leaders on how to maximize your investment in attending a procurement conference. I start the conversation by asking Frank how long he's been at ProcureCon and how he has seen the needs of the procurement community evolve in that time.
Hi. I've been with ProcureCon for 12 years now. I started in January 2013 as the program director for ProcureCon Indirect East, West, IT, and Marketing. And as the ProcureCon portfolio expanded over the past 12 years, I became a strategy leader and portfolio director, and hired a team of program managers to run the events directly. So we've grown from 4 events in 2013 to 11 events right before COVID, and now we're at 9 ProcureCon events across the portfolio in North America.
That's a lot of work, like creating those 9 events every year.
It is. They all have a different personality, and they all require special care and attention.
Mike, how about you? What role do you play?
I'm a program or portfolio director here on the team. I oversee our ProcureCon Indirect West, East, and IT conferences. I handle the program content and the speaker lineup, doing all the program research on those events to make sure that it's relevant for the industry. Mm-hmm. And also, is commercially viable for our sponsors. So we have a process that goes several months in terms of, pulling an event together, from the research to the program writing, to the speaker acquisition, to the attendance gathering. So it definitely keeps us busy and keeps us on our toes.
Mm-hmm. And John, how about you?
Similar to Mike, I am a portfolio director, so I'll kind of say for the essence of time here, the roles and responsibilities, since Mike just covered it. But I manage our ProcureCon contingent staffing event, as well as our ProcureCon travel conference, and then a newly launched event that will be launching next fall in October, our ProcureCon Connect event, which will be more one-on-one meeting centric versus our sort of larger scale conference that many folks know ProcureCon for.
Well, first of all, I want to say it's a pleasure that I have all of you in one place. So, we've partnered for a number of years, just supporting each other really in the growth of Art of Procurement, in the growth of ProcureCon. And it's a pleasure to welcome you onto the pod, but also to celebrate the 25th anniversary of ProcureCon, which will be 2025. So, Frank, you've been around the longest. You said you've got 12 years in the role. How have you seen the needs of the procurement community change and evolve over those 12 years?
It's been quite a journey over the past 12 years. When I first started, procurement was literally trying to figure out how to transition from purchasing to strategic sourcing, to try to figure out, where their value is, how to demonstrate what was, what procurement actually was, as opposed to just, we need, a printer, or we need to buy, 3,000 tons of grain. So it's been it's been quite a journey to kind of watch all the procurement practitioners go from, I would say the kind of on their way out as like, this is the end of my career. I'm gonna leave engineering and go into purchasing, and then retire, to seeing young people getting into this as a degree, and really trying to come up from the ground up with new ideas and new things to help propel procurement as a part of the supply chain and as a part of the corporation, instead of just this thing you do before you end your professional
Right.
career.
Yeah. Go for an easy life for the last 5 or 10 years.
So it's become a career as opposed to just a job.
Yeah, particularly on the indirect side too. I think that's where, since that's where our events focus on, is on the indirect side. Definitely much more maturity in that area across the board. Still, there's areas of development, and that varies depending on company, but definitely seeing a kind of a elevation of maturity of that indirect function across the board.
Do you see that reflected in kind of the demographics of the companies and the attendees, and whether it's the procurement is now a space that is that has a broader impact across a broader number of kind of sized companies, whereas before it may just have been some of the bigger companies at the start, and now it's companies of all sizes. Kind of, have you seen those kind of changes reflect in your attendee pool?
I think we've seen a change. I think when we first started these conferences, Frank, you can probably attest to this, we had a lot more of our I don't want to say old school traditional, like manufacturing companies had like the head of indirect, and I don't think they really knew what the head of indirect was supposed to do, because they were so focused on direct procurement. I think what I've seen a lot is especially with the like tech firms, companies like Facebook, Meta, Google and Microsoft, and like, just definitely an explosion maybe isn't the best word, but of movement towards really focusing on the indirect procurement function a little bit more. And it makes sense, right? Because they're not, they're providing software, they're not providing hard goods.
Yeah, I've noticed that, especially over the past 12 years, I've noticed a lot of CPOs, heads of indirects from large manufacturing companies go and become CPOs of smaller tech companies, because they can influence the corporation better. They can take their expertise from these large corporations and then go, hey, you're just starting out, or you need this function. Let me help you. I've done all this. I can really make an impact here and really do some innovative things for your company. And in this way, it's about procurement demonstrating their value to not just their customers and their stakeholders, but also the C-suite above them. So it's definitely become more fluid in terms of who's moving where.
Yeah, and that was kind of my career journey as well as a procurement professional. I started in the direct materials and automotive and supply chain, and it was very interesting to me how there's so much focus on manufacturing on the direct materials side in those organizations that the indirect can play less of a focus, even though the dollars saved are as important as the dollars saved in the direct materials space. So there's a lot of kind of, you get your grounding in your education and the direct materials side, but then move on into where there is no direct. So indirect is procurement, and kind of build out capabilities from that perspective. Mike, you've worked across a number of different categories, and you mentioned a little bit about some of the changes you've seen, but what are you kind of experiencing on a year-to-year basis as you kind of look at how you're supporting and how your need to support procurement is evolving with each year of events?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest change I've seen, at our category level events is just the explosion of SaaS providers and SaaS subscription and SaaS negotiations. That's definitely impacted our ProcureCon IT conference, which historically kind of was a mix between hardware, software, and telecom. Now it's pretty much all software. I mean, we have a little bit of hardware and laptops and, peripherals and that sort of stuff, but it's primarily focused on SaaS. Similar to our ProcureCon marketing conference, I mean, a lot of marketing is software. It's tech, MarTech. So definitely kind of a proliferation of SaaS technology has definitely, across the board, how do you manage those licenses? How do you negotiate those agreements? That's been probably the biggest trend I've seen at our category specific events over the years.
And John, I know we talked when we did the intros about kind of your background from a contingent workforce, but also a travel perspective coming into the procurement world. What are some of the trends that you're seeing? The practitioners who are attending events like contingent labor and events like travel are looking for, and how that's changing?
I think the big macro trends and I'll start with contingent first, and being entrenched in this industry for a few years now to kind of see the seismic shift amongst, especially the buyer community that comes to our event, is one, their appetite for small moves, big wins. They're looking for easy obtainable benchmarks that they can implement with the path of least resistance, whether that's, avoiding an arduous RFP process and sourcing new vendors, or, going back and building, months of business case and business planning to execute for leadership that really doesn't understand the ecosystem as well as they hoped. So what they're really looking for, because a lot of them all sit on islands by themselves, they're category managers that have maybe, based on the size of the company, team of 2 to 3.
Yeah.
But most of them sit by themselves. So what they really want is to get the easy answer. Like, how can I adapt the process? And one of the big things is that the separation between innovation and implementation, especially in staffing, it's hugely significant. It's like going from Mount Everest to the Mariana Trench in terms of where technology is at the top of Mount Everest and where the implementation and process is. I think they're just really hungry to see how much they can close the gap, because the industry is evolving faster than the willingness to accept it. And it's usually on board. And I've heard jokes amongst many buyers is that, like, there may be programs that still use MS-DOS, or in the application and Linux, which is scary to think, but like, that's how archaic it is. So there's real hunger for not just innovation from a technology platform. And I think out of most categories in indirect, contingent is most scared about AI, because a lot of vendors have used and abused that term and have sold a bill of goods. So I think there's a lot more trepidation for program managers and category managers to fully embrace. But I think what they really want is to actually use, like, the VMSs and the CRMs and all of these technologies that have been in bed with their programs for a few years now more effectively, so that they can sort of win the war on talent, talk to their candidates, onboarded properly. So those are the big things. And then lastly, for the staffing industry, a big macro trend is there seems to be a feeling amongst buyers that the relationship with their service providers is too one-sided.
Right.
That a lot of big MSPs and VMSs over the years have been either bought by private equity or heavily invested, and they put all of their effort into winning business, but not as much in maintaining it and nurturing it. So, like, especially contingent, like, a lot of service providers are very eager to generate business, almost to the point where buyers are a little bit tepid about saying, "Hey, I need a product." But when
they're going to get like 1,000 responses,
and when you hit that submit RFP button, it's like, you fold your eyes and pray, drown in responses. But there is a sense that buyers are like, enough is enough. Like, we're here to, like, be with us when we implement this, so that, like, when something does go wrong, like, I am not calling a customer service number in Bangladesh and have someone who doesn't really care. So there is a real sense there's a fork in the road, that it's either like MSPs change or the whole model is going to change. And those are the big things for contingent. And then for travel, I think that's the one category I'm super excited for. Over the last few years in putting this event, I have seen the community is small. They're a tight-knit group. They are big problem solvers. They're all about helping each other out, because I think there is was a common saying that misery finds company, and a lot of these practitioners who are running travel programs are probably the least like person in their org. And I'm sure people that are listening to this have all know, like, when you're submitting for business travel, it's a struggle. So like they are constantly trying to evolve to make that experience better from both, from booking to when a disruption happens on the journey to expense management. They, I think, have been the most eager to adapt and want new technology, especially AI and automation, to eliminate sort of the person-to-person interaction. But they really do come together to really help each other out. And it doesn't matter the size of the spend, whether you're, a $2 billion travel spend from a Fortune 100 company or, a small $2 to $10 million spend from a small mid-sized enterprise. There all is a sense like we're all in it together. And there's really sort of a democracy within that community. So that's the big thing. But the problem is, it's just trying to get an understanding of like where the industry is. There are people who say that, it's now moved past 2019, which was that huge benchmark that the industry wanted to go to after the pandemic. Yeah. But then you see it, especially being in the event industry, dealing with buyers, it's been a struggle over the last 2 years to get people to get spend to go to this. So yeah, where are all these numbers in corporate travel? Is it mostly for investment generation? Because it's definitely not in industry learning and education. So it really is, you could ask one person they get one answer, and then ask someone else and they give you a completely different answer of what their thoughts are on the state of the market. So yeah.
I'd love to know, and kind of open the forum for this one, how you take trends that you're hearing. John, you talked a lot about all the trends that you're hearing in the travel and the contingent workforce space, and how that informs kind of program design when you're building an event for practitioners to come to, and the balance of not over focusing on one area because you heard it from a couple of folks that may be very specific in terms of they have a problem, versus what's going to appeal to as broad a population as possible for folks who are going to come to the events, but still be impactful for as many people as possible as well.
Very carefully is the best way I can say that. You bring up a good point. I think, John, you had mentioned this, and I remember this from my days on the contingent workforce program, how everyone told you they don't want to hear about direct sourcing of the conference. And then after the conference, they're like, why wasn't there anything on direct sourcing? I'd say, well, what do you want me to do? Same thing with AI, right? We'll hear from some folks, they want to hear more about, how AI is impacting procurement. There's other folks that are just like, if I hear AI one more time, I'm going to leave the room. So, we try to, I'd say, kind of take the 80-20 model a little bit, where 20% of our programming is these kind of high level trends, typically in more of a panel discussion format, because, there may not be a ton of case studies on these things. There are some speakers like Melissa Drew, for example, that's very, kind of forthcoming on a lot of these issues that can speak to these very, kind of lofty topics, but there aren't many people that can do that. And then, we have a certain percentage of our content that is kind of the tried and true kind of nuts and bolts of, just negotiation best practices, working with your supplier risk management, that sort of thing. Yeah. And making sure that content, though, does have, an updated kind of, that's not rinsing and repeating every single
right. Yeah. And going back to what Mike was saying, there are sessions, looking back at 25 years of agendas, there are sessions and topics that we're still covering. It's kind of amazing that, procurement it's moving more like a turtle than an ostrich. So, while we're talking about AI, we're also talking about how not to bully suppliers still. So it's kind of amazing at how much has changed and how much is stayed the same. And I think a lot of it comes down to, and unfortunately or fortunately, procurement is viewed as a cost center and not a profit center. So getting budget to deploy new technologies is very difficult. So, they're stuck. And I think you and I talked about this about a year ago, a hamster wheel, where they want to move forward, but, just budgetary forces are preventing them from making these investments in AI and our people want to hear about. So, I think the biggest challenge for us in putting programs together is how do you balance what people have been talking about for 25 years with the future? And then how do you get people to talk about the future when there aren't that many positive use cases yet for these technologies?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because we see this from the content that we create from a digital perspective, that there is definitely hunger for, okay, I understand the concept, but give me the use cases. The use cases are what makes it real. And so, and as you say, a lot of times where use cases exist, organizations don't necessarily want to share them because it's it's a secret sauce for them. So it's kind of trying to find as much of use cases as you possibly can, so it helps people kind of build their own business case, where folks may not be willing to give up the entire playbook.
And I think, this came up during the Indirect East event back in September, was this term eliminating the suck. And I was inspired by this topic, not only talking with people when we were building the program, but listening to a few practitioners during a virtual town hall about is that I spend 40% of my work week on stuff that I hate doing.
Yeah.
And I need to spend more time on driving strategic value. And a lot of that is, arduous tasks of data entry, making sure things are right, and contract reviews. And if we can figure out a way to sort of offset that so that we can focus on the things that are going to make us more strategically valuable within our organization, then that's a game changer. And that can be across the board 15 different topics, but that's, I think what attendees really want is how can I focus more time on being innovative versus wanting to bang my head against the desk because I have to review one contract after another. So I think misery is going to drive this industry to a better place. So,
or at least a different place,
Well, I think that the opportunity, there's a lot of opportunities, as we see with all the different technologies that are available now and the changes. And, I feel sometimes like it's a cliche and a broken record about the changes that are happening and the potential for broad scale change for procurement, in this moment. But I think that it's true. And it's, it's around embracing that rather than fearing it, which is one of the biggest challenges, from a change management perspective. But looking at, I don't like half my job as the starting point for, how can I embrace this technology to make that go away, I think gives you a far more empowerment than looking at it thinking this is going to replace half of what I do. What's going to be left and what do I do about that? And forums like ProcureCon are places where you can go and learn about what those technologies are and what people are doing and what some of the use cases that people are putting together. So that we always talk about from our digital content is about how do you drive change but do it with confidence? And you do it with confidence by listening to stories of others that have kind of gone before you. Frank, one of the things I was interested, we talked about a lot of changes and how the events have changed over the years, but from more of a kind of general event planning perspective, what are some of the kind of key changes over the years that have provided opportunity or maybe even challenges to overcome, and how you actually think about the structure and what you provide at an event, regardless of kind of what the category content is?
Yeah, when I first started, it was a very introverted group of people. They came, they sat in sessions, they did what they were told, and they had a cocktail, and then they left. But as what we mentioned earlier about a new generation coming in who have this background in procurement, this background in supply chain, and they want to create change and create value, and they want to meet people. So the networking piece has probably become equal with the content.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to provide them as many opportunities for small group discussion as possible. For we do wine tastings now and mixology classes, and our cocktail parties have gotten a little bit more crazy. So yeah, and expensive. But we think that, by building these networks in smaller groups really helps propel the industry, because 500 people in a room, it's hard to meet everybody.
Yeah.
So we've, over the past, at least the 12 years I've been there, with Mike and John, really kind of, how can we break the audience down? How can we group people either by maturity level or by subject matter or by industry or by interest, or by, this is the next solution I want to buy. We try to mix up the people throughout the event as much as possible now, so that they're not just sitting in a room being talked at, and we're really giving them an experience to share ideas and strategize. And Joanna Martinez used to say that if I can go home with 3 nuggets, no matter how big or small, that I can put to use immediately, that's what makes a successful ProcureCon event. And by putting people in smaller groups and allowing them to share information like that, I think we'll give them more nuggets of information than hearing 6 people on a stage talk about how to create value from your suppliers.
No, that I think that experience is really important, and that I see that's how things have changed. Over even post COVID, is that focus on kind of the entire experience versus it being networking only or content only, but it's kind of marrying those together in a more facilitated way, so that people are walking away getting something out of their investment in coming to an event.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because within indirect procurement, each category that we focus on has a different reason for attending. And from my contingent staffing, which is one of our biggest conferences, it's very networking. People want to talk. Content probably would be, second to the people wanting to network with each other. And travel, it's all about problem solving. It's going to sessions, going to deep dive workshops, think tanks, real problem solving, real elbow grease content, and like how to kind of figure out the balance between a category lead in contingent or travel or MRO or staffing or IT. It's figuring out what all these people want at their conference and kind of shaping it that way.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work, but it takes a lot of trial and error, to figure out like what your practitioners really want, but also your suppliers too, because obviously they're, a significant component in the event. So it's how do they want to engage with their partners too? It's not just like, how am I providing thought leadership and best practices, but how am I also helping the community engage in business? And what's the best platform to do it? So
Now, I know that it's coming up on time to wrap up. I had another question that I will again open up to all of you to answer, and it's more about you obviously talk to an awful lot of attendees for all the different events and different event series that you do. Are there some common themes or pieces of advice you would give to attendees in how they can maximize their time spent, the investment of time, the investment of money coming to a ProcureCon event? What do you kind of hear afterwards from those that really feel like they got the most out of attending an event?
I can jump in here first. So what I've been saying and what I've been kind of hearing over the years is the 60-40 approach. 60% of your time at a ProcureCon event should be focused on your pain points, like your day-to-day operation. So like stuff that's in your purview is 60% of your time should be focused on mission critical items there. 40% of your time should be spent outside the box in areas that you don't focus in, that you don't know much about, so that you can learn, because that's really the only way this industry or all industries are going to advance, is not doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah. So if you're learning that and improving that, yes, but it's being surprised, it's having those spontaneous conversations, or going into a think tank that you may have not have even thought of approaching, that you may get that one nugget or a different approach to it.
And not expect it. Yeah.
that has been something that I have been kind of preaching, especially for the 2020 Vive events that I've kind of learned over the last 3 years is, significant amount of your time needs to kind of be focused on things that are mission critical, but also take risks. And this is a risk-oriented group. So I think they can jump on that theme pretty well. So that seems to be holding grip. And, people listening, if you're thinking about conferences or ProcureCon, have that mindset.
And I would add also to not think of attending ProcureCon, especially if you're going to bring your team with you, as a cost to attend the conference. Think of it as an investment in your career. Like what you gain from these 3 days. It's not just 3 days out of the office to attend the conference. It's a 3-day investment in your future.
Yeah.
It will help you do your job better. It will help you find people who can help you do your job better. It will help you find vendors who can help you do your job better. So if you walk out of ProcureCon, after spending whatever you spend to attend the event as an investment, think of it as you're going to get a return on that. It's not just, it's a cost. It's not just 3 days out of the office. It's, this will make me a better procurement practitioner.
Yeah. Yeah, and then to add to that point, Frank, I think the other thing, just trend we've been seeing, obviously with so much work being done remote, it's very easy for attendees just to get on Zoom calls and kind of focus in on that during the conference. So we've been definitely reminding folks, it's like, okay, you're at a conference, give yourself a little bit of a break. It's okay to push some of that. I mean, not everything, but some of that off to the side while you focus on yourself and focus on the opportunities that you have over the next few days that you will not have when you're back in the office.
And I just want to build on something that really builds on what Frank, you said around the investment in yourself and around content is have a plan for how you're going to put that learning into practice once you get home, once you get back to the office. Because I speak from personal experience of going to events when I was a practitioner as well. As you go, you learn all these ideas, you get excited about them, and you get back to 150 emails, and then you forget it all. And so, whether it's something that you're doing on an individual basis to hold yourself accountable to putting something into practice, or if you're a leader and somebody on your team has gone to an event, put some formal kind of process in place where the attendees have to report back in a lunch and learn, for example, to the team and talk about some of their learnings. So then you can start tying some of those activities with real world events, because that's how learning sticks, is actually by doing. So as much as you can connect those two afterwards is how you're going to maximize the investment of your time.
And Phil, if I can just add one more thing, and that's something that we've also preached to our thought leaders too, because they're the ones that are delivering all of this impactful stuff, is that when we prep them and we are getting them ready for the show, the critical question we ask them is like, imagine you're in the audience. Like, what are you going to want to hear from this group that is going to be a game changer? And sometimes, the slaying the dragon and how you achieve the impossible and the wow is great. But really at the end of the day, like you said, it's like that process, that little kind of juicy nugget that you can go back to. And I think that really does help the overall experiences when our content providers and our thought leaders know with that mindset, hey, if I'm going to be in the audience, like what's the thing that's going to make me feel like I got the most out of that session? So it's not just our attendees, it's our thought leadership too, because like we're really leaning on them to be that storyteller, but also that lecturer who's going to teach, that thing that's going to make the people better at the end of the day.
Yeah, and not to toot our own horn, but I will do this, is we've been trying to expand our thought leaders in sense that I think historically we looked at, very large companies like, kind of your massive Fortune 500 companies as thought leaders. What we're finding is some of these small, mid-sized companies, we want them involved as well too. And we try to tell the folks, who are presenting, from, I don't know, like the likes of Facebook, et cetera, say, look, you've got to understand the audience. Not everyone has the resources or perceived resources that you do. So make sure you adjust your content accordingly, so that way people know that they can accomplish this without, being in an imperfect situation.
Yeah, that content needs to be approachable, or not just something that's as aspirational but feels like it's out of touch, because not out of touch but out of reach, because of the size of the organization that's delivering it.
Yeah.
So let's leave it there. I want to thank you so much, John, Mike, and Frank, for joining me on the podcast. I want to thank you all for your partnership at ProcureCon of Art of Procurement. Certainly since we started, we're just going into our 10th year in 2025, which is crazy as well to think about.
I know, right?
If somebody's listening to this and they just want to get an idea of what your calendar events looks like in 2025, Frank, where would be the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so if you go to procureconindirect.com, that will take you to our first event of the year, which is ProcureCon Indirect West. And at the top, there's a menu with all of the events that will tell you when they all are for 2025.
Okay, perfect. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes for today's episode. We also have a page on our website, which is artofprocurement.com/procurecon, that has a listing of upcoming events as well there that anyone can go and just click through, and that will take you straight through to the ProcureCon website. So once again, John, Mike, and Frank, thanks a lot for joining me on Art of Procurement today.
If this episode struck a chord with you, please do send it to somebody. We grow here at Art of Procurement through word of mouth, and that would be really appreciated. You can also support us by giving us a thumbs up, a star rating, or a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Since 2015, we've built the world's largest free resource for procurement professionals looking to elevate their impact. Our resources span podcasts like this, videos, blog posts, papers, and events. To join us on the inside and to ensure you never miss an episode, a webinar, an event, or a post, please do subscribe to our weekly newsletter, This Week in Procurement. You can do that at artofprocurement.com/subscribe. That's artofprocurement.com/subscribe. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.